Okay, Unit 5, Lesson 1 again, or the second half of Lesson 1. We're going to look at simple compound interest, the idea of what compound interest is, and how to do some basic calculations involving compound interest. So we've already talked about simple interest. We're going to take a look at compound interest. And compound interest is a little bit different than simple interest. It involves taking the interest that you've earned during a certain period of time and adding it to the principal to calculate with the principal for the next period. So we would get the money we started with plus the interest, and then the interest on both instead of just the principal, which is the difference between simple and compound interest. So we're going to take a look at a table to try to understand, if I can get rid of to try to understand the difference between compound interest and simple interest. So if I have an investment of $500 for 3 years, 6% compounded annually. Annually is a word you're going to see a lot of. It just means each year. So the first year, I start out with $500, and I'm going to earn interest on that $500 at 6%. So I have $500 times 0.06 for 1 year, which means I have how much interest? Let me get my calculator going. 500 times 0.06, which means I have $30 in interest. So the amount of money I now have is the $500 I started with plus the $30 in interest. So I have $530. So for year 2, my principal becomes, when we have compound interest, $530. So my principal is $530 times 0.06 for a year. So if I have 530 times 0.06, I make more interest, and I get $31.80 worth of interest. So I now have 530 plus 31.80, so $561.80. So in the third year, I will take my principal plus all of my interest, $561.80, and I'm going to earn interest on all of it, not just the $500 I started with. Whoops, I forgot my decimal 80 there. 561.80 times my interest for 1 year means I will have $33.71 worth of interest. So altogether, I will have the $561.80 plus my interest, and I will have $595.51 altogether. So the idea is that you take your interest earned, add it to your principal, and you get a new amount in the principal. And because there's more principal, you will get more interest. That is why compound interest is a more popular way to save money. So rather than use a chart, we have a formula that will actually let us calculate the amount of money we invest plus the principal all in one step, instead of having to add it and calculate and add it and calculate and add it and calculate. The formula that lets us do that is right here. A equals P bracket 1 plus I to the N, where A is the amount of the investment's worth in the future. P is the principal, just like with simple interest. I is the interest rate per compounding period, and it's always in decimal, just like with simple interest. And N is the number of times that it's compounded or calculated. You can think of that as how often they're calculating the interest. So a couple of things to know about interest. Interest rates are stated per year or per annum. Per annum means per year. Yearly compounding is stated as compounded annually. That means they calculate interest once a year. So to figure out the amount of interest earned when using this formula, we would have to take the amount we calculate minus the principal we started, and that will give us the interest. Whereas with simple interest, you just calculate the interest. All right, so compound interest formula to determine the following amounts and then find the interest earned. So my principal is $1,500. My time, whoops, let's change that. My formula, P bracket 1 plus I to the end. So compounded annually is once a year. So the number of times they're calculating the interest is 10 times, once every year. And the interest is being calculated once every year, so 0.05% each time. So to figure out the amount, I have 1,500 times 1 plus 0.05 to the exponent 10. And then you should be able to type that all into your calculator in one step. Or if you understand that bracket is really just 1.05. 1 plus 0.05 would be 1.05. So 1,500 times 1.05 to the exponent 10. Excuse me. So we have $2,443.34 accumulated after 10 years. So if I look at the second one, $850 for 5 years compounded annually. My principal is $850. My N, 5 years, once every year, and my I is 0.031. So I have $850, 1 plus 0.031, and I have 5 as my exponent. So I'm going to have 50 times 1.031 to the exponent 5, which gives me $990.18 approximately. Now if we look at this last one, there's my, whoops, not my A, my principal. So it's a good idea to get in the habit of making a list over here, because as the questions get more complicated, this list is going to help you sort through what the numbers mean in the problem. So my N is 5 years, I is 0.021. So I've got 11,000 times 1 plus 0.021 to the exponent 5. 1,000 times 1.021 exponent 5 is $12,204.54. So that's all there is to simple interest. It's just understanding that the interest is getting added on before you start calculating it again. So you have the principal plus the interest. So you earn more money quickly. So we have a different formula to be able to calculate that. All right, you can try the questions on page 138 to 143 out of the textbook. And then we'll take a look at some more complicated compound interest questions.